Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, happy 2022, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and for this first episode of 2022, you're going to hear from Dr. Michelle Fulta. Dr. Fulta is a music educator and a choir practitioner and a really awesome human. In this conversation, she tells you all about the story of Voices of the Valley, a community choir based out of Columbus, Georgia. Through tracing the 7-year history of her time with the organization, we talk about the importance of value and mission statement, how choir is such an opportunity for both individual togetherness and for transferring skills and knowledge. We talk about how to do the work, which I think makes this the most absolute perfect episode for kicking off the new year. What is something that you dream of doing and you just need to sit down and do the work? Hopefully this episode will give you the oomph you need to just go out and get started. You'll learn about Michelle, Dr. Fulta, where she came from, how she got there, and what she's doing to impact the young lives in Columbus, Georgia. I think there's a lot of fun things you can take from this, and I really think it's going to be interesting to see what we all do individually together in 2022. As always, the Music Ed Matters podcast is brought to you by our sponsors, the Kinnison Choral Company and Kaleidoscope Tours. Make sure you check out all of their awesome information in the episode notes or at emilybirch.org/sponsors. If you're looking for a community to connect with in this 2022 year, please go over to patreon.com/musicedmatters, and anything that you can do to support the podcast, whether you want the bonus episodes or the monthly meetups, or you just want to make sure that I keep bringing you great content, any support over there is really helpful. Take a second to like and review the podcast, and I think those are all the announcements. Without further ado, let's do the work and learn all about Voices of the Valley and how to individually together do this whole choral artistry thing with my friend, Dr. Michelle Fulta. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we are talking to Dr. Michelle Fulta, music educator extraordinaire, great friend. Hi!
Hi, Emmy!
I'm so excited to spend some time talking with you. How are you doing today, Michelle?
Oh, I'm fabulous. Great to see you.
We connected, 6, 7, 8 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's been around 5 or 6 years, maybe.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I feel like COVID makes everything a couple years.
What is time?
Yeah, what is time? It was so much fun. We connected because of a choral curriculum project with Quaver Music, and we didn't know each other from Adam, and we clicked right off the bat. And we clicked because of teaching pedagogy.
That's right, because we're super nerdy about it.
Oh my gosh, so nerdy. How do we get them from step A to step B, and what are all the steps? I just remember it being so much fun working with you and doing all that project. Tell the listeners who don't know you, who is Dr. Michelle Fulta?
Oh, wow. Okay. I am an associate professor of music ed at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia. And I'm also artistic director of the Voices of the Valley Children's Chorus. And let's see. Yeah, I'm a mom. I have a 3-year-old daughter, Lena, and my husband, Zach, is the math teacher here in town.
Cool. Oh, that works out really well. Having the math side of things. How long have you been at Columbus State now?
This is my 7th year here, which is crazy. Like, it's insane that this is year 7. And it's really cool because now I feel like I'm starting to see the fruits of my labor a little bit, where my some of my first graduates are now like taking their kids to GMEA and like doing these really cool things within their program. So I'm really getting to see those kids shine now. It's great.
That is awesome. And where did you come from before Columbus State? How did you get to where you are now?
So my adult life, I was a middle school choir director in Austin, Texas at Lamar Middle School for 8 years. During that time, I created the Fine Arts Academy there with lots of help from PTA and administration, but it was a 4-year project. They were looking to close the school, and we became a Fine Arts Academy, and now they're thriving and all of that. And then during that process, I thought, well, someone's got to run the academy and I'm the one who wrote it. So it has to probably be me. And so I started looking at graduate schools to do administrative work, to be an arts administrator. And I connected with one of my mentors at TMEA in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling him all about this. And I had this big plan and he looks at me and he goes, "What are you doing? You're a teacher. Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, okay. And I thought about it. And then he got me connected, of course, with the graduate program at the University of North Texas. And I instantly was like, yeah, what am I doing, honestly? So I started my master's. And I was still working at Lamar during the time, working on the academy, et cetera. And then towards the end, of course, it was, hey, you should come do a PhD. And so I thought long and hard about it and decided that the best way to reach more children is to help create and craft great music educators who are confident in their style and their pedagogy. It changed the course of where I thought I was going. So I started the PhD at UNT and loved it. And I still missed having an ensemble because I am a practitioner at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And my last year of my PhD, another professor who had just been hired came from Columbus State and said, "Hey, there's a job opening there. They've got a children's choir. I think you'd be perfect." And so I came here, fell in love with it. And the choir is a huge part of who I am as a music ed professor. It's my vessel for raising the level of musicianship in our county, in our schools, but also training the next generation of teachers with authentic music experiences beyond the simulated experiences that they get in their coursework. This is an actual authentic experience where they've traveled internationally with us. They've gone to GMEA. They're going to be going to ACDA with us in a few months. So they're getting these behind the scenes look of what it really looks like to be a choir director, well beyond what I can teach them in a semester of coursework.
I love that you add that practitioner piece of it, because I think so often once we step out of the trenches, we as professors sometimes don't have touch. And I have my community choirs for the exact same reason. If I'm not a practitioner, what am I teaching my students in the methods classes? Because the students in the classrooms are changing so quickly. We have to teach our teachers to be flexible and change quickly. So I'm so glad you said that. Tell me a little bit more about VOV, Voices of the Valley.
Oh, VOV is my heart and soul. So when I arrived, Voices of the Valley, going back to the practitioner aspect, I wholeheartedly agree. I was worried about becoming one of those professors who, this is how I taught 30 years ago. And now I look back, I've been an educator for 17 years. That was pre-YouTube, pre-Facebook. So many things have changed in just that amount of time that I wanted to make sure I stayed relevant and was able to provide the skills that were actually applicable to what people were needing in the classroom. It's kind of like when you light a candle, you got to keep adding a wick and wax to keep it going or it burns out. When I arrived with Voices of the Valley, to be honest, it was not in the best condition. I now know, this wasn't told to me initially, but the founding director and I have had some wonderful conversations, and he shared with me that had I not come along, it probably would have disbanded, just because there was a lack of vision, a lack of what do we do. And I'm a builder that's my best thing that I can come do with the choir. I did it at Lamar as an educator, and I feel like that's where I thrive. And the way that you build from the ground up is starting with the fundamentals. And you start with the fundamentals of choral artistry, vocal technique, the basics of learning the language of music. And I specifically don't say music literacy, because music literacy, in my view, is a very holistic process that includes a variety of different skill sets within knowing what a note is. If you don't know what to do with that note, it's useless. I have a 3-year-old who can't read yet. And, if she can't see the picture or know what's the words are or what it symbolizes, it's useless. Like a Scrabble tile, it's just like, right. You got to put it together. So that's where I started. I started with, what do I want this choir to look like? And honestly, outside of the confines of a public school system, I was able to think about, what does that vision mean? And for me, servant leadership is a huge part of who I am as a person. How do I use my skill set to make this place better than I found it? Mm-hmm. And for us, it was going to be our choral artistry, and also making sure that we were always engaging within the community, giving back, and reminding ourselves of the importance of what we do as an organization, that it's not just about us. We have a responsibility with our gifts to provide back to the community. So the vision was created to engage the community with choral artistry. The choir itself had dwindled down to 10 members only. Mm-hmm. And so there was a little bit of a panic at the beginning of, what do I do? Luckily, I have some great contacts here. I was at that time had been recruited into an amazing church choir, our St. Thomas Episcopal Church Choir. And the director, who's now our chairman, Rick McKnight, got everybody together and said, okay, Michelle needs singers for this choir. And it was like a movie montage. It was all of a sudden there were retired teachers in the room, because I didn't know anyone. I was new here. And there were retired teachers like, oh, I can talk to this person. Oh, my granddaughter is here. And and it was like watching all these people come out to say, and I remember saying after they all spoke, I can't believe this is happening right now. You guys don't even know me. You don't even know if I'm good enough for this. And two singers that were in that room said, actually, we were in your audition. We think that we can take a bet on you. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening right now. So we ended up getting 27.
Wow.
And it grew very fast. And then it was about my two core characteristics of my philosophy of education, that students must feel valued and they must feel successful. So I had to make sure that I chose literature that was going to both challenge them, but highlight what they've already got. And especially when there's not a lot there, that they didn't know what a scale was, they didn't know major minor, they didn't know solfege, none of that. And so I started out with very simple major pieces and 2-part partner songs, which, to me, I always like to say that that's like the super sly way of entering harmony is, hey, I'll give you a partner song. It's the best. Or rounds. So we did a lot of those things that were a way to start producing a product that would start to make people pique interest, because voices had been kind of swept under the rug, and most of the community was like, oh, okay, they were good once. But so our first concert was here in our small black box theater, and I think we had 150 people, and the St. Thomas Choir came and sang for Irish Blessing, which is the last piece that I do. I do Linda Spevacek Avery's arrangement of Irish Blessing. I've done that at the end of every concert since 2004. It's a way to continue to connect with the community after students have left. And so alumni can come up. What's great is if anyone came to Columbus that I used to teach, they could come up on stage. And I rarely conducted. It was conducted by Rick, our director at St. Thomas. I rarely conducted. It's either a student or a community member. So it's a great way to kind of always check back in with that vision, always checking back in with that philosophy statement, because that's the guiding light for where we go next. So we had our first concert. From there, it was just continuing to work and do the work to build up their skill set. I think the next semester I taught them solfege. I taught them minor. And so we did a piece in minor. Anytime I'm teaching them a new skill, it's not just here's some information for you to memorize. It's you see this part in your piece, it's now in a minor tonality. Let me teach you law-based minor. And yes, law-based minor, my friends, really valuable too for our ed students who are working on staff, because they're taught in their skills class do-based minor, which, it's great to know those things, but when you're looking for transfer of knowledge and transfer of skill set, it's much easier to do a law-based minor. And I'll fight anyone who says otherwise.
I agree wholeheartedly. I have your back on that one. There is
I
a
love
time
it.
and a place for dough-based, but the transfer of our
Yes.
skills in movable dough.
Absolutely. So, and that was another thing too, the staff that first semester, I had the music ed program here was doing okay, but the choral music ed was struggling a little bit. There was an interim between, and the person who was here before me, who was incredible, was Elizabeth Parker. And I mean, she can do no wrong in my book. But some of that had dwindled since she had left. And I had one freshman.
Oh no.
One freshman in my intro class. And I walked up to her one day, I think it was like October, and I was like, hey, it was just me. And I had an assistant that had come on to help a little bit. But I was like, hey, do you want to volunteer and help me out a little bit with this children's choir? And she was crazy and said yes. 7 years later, she's our assistant director and has her own choir within Voices of the Valley. Olivia Fortson is, there's no one else that knows this organization other than me than she. So we just continue to build on those fundamentals and those skill sets. I don't care how young you are, how inexperienced you are. Beautiful singing is always paramount. Always. Choral artistry is always paramount. It's my job to make sure that I present them with material where they can be successful at that. Yes, you can match pitch, pending that I've picked the music that's not going to be too high or too low, or it's beautifully in your range. So we continue to work on that artistry. By year 3, we were starting to be in our large hall. We were also building the program. A reputation was starting to get around. We started performing in the Nutcracker every year. We were part now of local events, which was really great. But one thing I started to notice within the one choir, because it was just one choir, the learning curve was starting to spread out, meaning I had kids who started with me who were continuing to get the reinforcement of all the fundamentals. They were learning how to access music as a language and apply it to their music. And then I was getting 9 and 10-year-olds who they were being thrown into the gambit. And it was difficult at that time, the way the scheduling was and the way that the choir was set up to facilitate that. So at that time, we split the choir into 2 choirs and had the large ensemble, which we call Bella Voce, and then we had the advanced ensemble, which we call Sola Voce. So a lot of those kids were auditioning for that, and kind of it started to expand. That happened again in a couple of years later, maybe a year later, COVID, I don't know what time is anymore, where we really were seeing, well, now within that larger ensemble, that learning curve, they still need a little bit of extra care. So we started a 3rd choir, which is Prima Voce. That is our beginning chorus for choristers who have never been in a choir, who don't know how to access music in a way that they can access it as a language. And so Olivia is the director of that choir, and she gets them trained where they need to be, where then they can audition to progress and advance into Bella Voce, which is now our large ensemble. And then those in Bella Voce can progress into Sola Voce. So now we have that progression. Additionally, when we created Prima Voce, we created a music education unit that occurs every single rehearsal night. So our students, in addition to having an hour-long rehearsal, also have a 30-minute music education time. During that time, we sight read, we solfege. One of my favorite things to do is an activity I created about harmonization, where I teach them to read vertically. I teach them to read macro. And I do that because when I was there, I didn't know how to read music growing up. And I was a pianist growing up, never learned how to read music. I memorized everything. Um, and that was really hard for me to start undergrad, um, not being able to do that. In fact, um, I'll go off on a little tangent here. When I auditioned for the University of Texas, I auditioned in front of Suzanne Pence and Craig Hella Johnson, and because Craig Hella was the director at that point. Um, my audition pieces were adequate, and the voice was there. I'd been singing a ton, had a great private voice lesson teacher. She was wonderful. But then when I went into my sight reading, Craig handed me the sight reading, and I was like, what do you want me to do? I literally had no idea what sight reading even was. And he said, well, I'll play your first pitch and then you can just sing it on solfege or numbers or whatever you're comfortable. And I was like, sing what? Like, I had no clue. I had no clue. And so, but I could feel that it was not right. Like I could feel like because I didn't know, something was wrong. So later that day, I went up to Dr. Pence's office and I said, look, I know I can't read music, but I want to be a teacher so, so bad. And if you let me into the school, I will be the best teacher that you ever have come out of it. And she stood up and she grabbed, it's still on my shelf up here. She grabbed a Methodist hymnal. She handed it to me and she said, you better learn how to read music. And I said, yes, ma'am, I promise I will. And I did. At the time it was the year 2000. And I went and bought a bunch of those Alfred, CD-ROMs.
Yes.
And I started teaching myself how to read. And then I learned do bass minor. And then I tried to teach that as a teacher and realized that law bass minor and movable do was a way easier thing. So it really took me a while it was like, just learn this information and then regurgitate it. I don't want to teach them that way, the kids that I have. I want them to know that solfege is a tool. The notes on the page are a tool. What we do is we bring it to life, but you've got to have all the information to do that. It's kind of like the ingredients for making a dish. The notes and the theory and the chords and all those things, those are the ingredients, but you take that and craft it into art. And so I try to really work with them on that by doing harmony exercises where I'll line up chords and I'll say, okay, how do you make a 1 chord? And they'll say do, mi, and so. Great. I want you to make for me a 1, 4, 5, 6 progression. And then I say, does this sound like any of your music that you're singing right now? No. And then someone will nail it and go, this is such and such piece. I'll be like, great. So they'll sing their roadmap on solfege. And then they'll sing it in rhythm. And then all of a sudden we've created an a cappella arrangement on the spot. So they're composing. In some ways they're improvising until they figure out, what path they want to take via solfege. And then they do it. And at first I wasn't sure if it was going to stick, but now some of these kids have been doing this kind of activity with me for 4 years or so. And I look at that music and I'll say, what chord is that? And they'll say, well, that's a 1 chord. I said, why do I hear it in minor? Someone's singing law somewhere. They need to have those that should not be in minor. 1 chord is A and they're major. Great. The hardest thing about teaching it was teaching them Roman numerals. And I was like, why do you guys not know your Roman numerals?
Yeah, they don't know those.
So having that was a huge tangent, but having that beginning choir allows them to get some of the initial tools, like one would with cooking: salt, pepper, pans, pots, spoons, those initial tools. So then we can take it and say, okay, now you can do this with it. Now you can take it and craft this. So we kind of have a parallel curriculum happening in that music ed course. We're working on the fundamentals of singing, making sure that the intonation, the resonance, the space, the breathing, the physical, the mental, the emotional, all of that's in there. Plus, we're talking about the language and the tools so they know how to use them to create art. And so that happened a few years ago. Then we really started to propel. In 2018, we did a choir tour of England with St. Thomas. And that was an incredible experience. All of our music had to be a cappella and Anglican, or could pass as Anglican. And so we really started to make the shift from cutesy kind of music that I feel like a lot of that was me coming from a public school choir background of having some of that show choir stuff in there. We transitioned to high art because England required it. And then it was like, wow, we're really good at this. This is a niche for us that doesn't exist in the region in a concentrated sense. We have some amazing choirs in our region that do high art music, but to have that as our concentration was big. That next fall, we just continued to grow. We grew to 80 singers. Fall of 19, we were doing Benjamin Britten. We did Ceremony of Carols. Also in early 2019, we did our first GMEA performance, and it was life-changing for all of us. It was like, we've arrived, we've started. And then 2019, we had a great concert, and then of course, the bottom dropped out. And COVID hit with a vengeance like it did with all of us. We ended our season early in March. I continued to meet with them on Zoom and just check in with them. We did some trivia nights. The very last thing we did that season was sing Irish Blessing virtually. And there's actually a video of it on our YouTube channel of us doing that. And it was emotional for sure. And then, we kind of, like everyone, sat through that summer going, what do we do now? For me, not being together was never an option, because one of the things I've learned through Voices of the Valley is that it's so much more than just making music. What we do is we have an art that we do individually together. And there's very few experiences that can imitate what we do, where we're creating this kind of energy with our own bodies together in a room. And for COVID to come in, it sucked the life out of us. So we started again in the fall, and we started virtually. I tried to create some sort of virtual rotation where it wouldn't be, they were all online, and it just didn't have the same impact as being together. And I actually read an article, and I want to say it was on the Choral Connections blog or something, that of a choir who was using FM radios in a parking lot to have choir safely, where the singers could stay in their car. So I started heavily researching that because I was starting to lose members. I had already lost several. But I was starting to lose them because we weren't really doing anything. So yeah. And it was hard for me. I was in my guest room with my 2-year-old at the time, and it was hard for all of us. But so I started researching that, and I bought all these mics, and we couldn't get it to work. I again went through at this point, Rick is our chairman, and I said, can we look into getting the parking garage across the street from our music building? And because the kids rehearse here at the Schwab School of Music in Columbus. And so we were able to get a deal for that and reserve the entire 4th floor of the parking garage. And on October 5th, 2020, we had our first parking garage rehearsal. And we did that every week. And I was in a face mask, the whole staff. In June, I learned how to sew. We started making singer's masks. You see how old mine is, because they didn't exist yet. Nobody knew what to do. And I was like, well, let's go. And so a team of volunteers, we all got together. We started making masks for the singers to have. So they all had their singer's mask. They were in the parking garage, separated. We bought all this equipment to facilitate outdoor rehearsals, which we were fortunately financially able to do that, unlike several organizations. So it happened to work out that way. And we started 1-hour rehearsals, entrance, exit, COVID check-ins. and we did the dang thing.
Yeah.
And we did it week in and week out. It was hot. It was cold. It was loud. We had drag racers. We had people laughing on the street, or, music, loud cars. The train would come by. But they showed up every week, and they kept coming back, and they kept coming back, because we all knew at that point that nothing was worse than us not being together. And then I remember one night we had a particularly cold, really cold snap, and it was going to be like low 40s or something, or mid 40s, but still,
which is really cold for Georgia. Let's just, if you're
super
listening
cold.
and you're not in Georgia, like, that's ice cubey. That's awful.
We don't know how to handle that.
No, we don't.
So I went down to the local coffee shop, and the owner there I know, and I texted him and I said, hey, can you get hot chocolate for them? Just let me know what it costs. I don't care. Can I just get a catered, like a jug that I could give them hot chocolate, because it's going to be really cold? And he's like, no problem. Send your staff. No, great. And at the time I had a staff of 5. So we had they're undergraduate music ed majors. So went down there, got the hot chocolate, brought it back, and set it up. We had a little station. We were all gloved and masked. And so literally during rehearsal, they could, like, at any point go over and get hot chocolate to warm up. They were, some of them, how kids are, like, they're like, I don't need to wear a coat. Well, so, like, I brought a bunch of blankets and stuff, and we had, like, this whole little area of just like a warm up station. Like, do you need gloves? Do you need a blanket? And they just were gritty. And it was incredible to me, because I feel like we often underestimate what kids can do. Mm-hmm. And they are so resilient, but they're also so gritty. You hear so many times of, oh, kids are so soft nowadays. Not my kids. They haven't seen these kids if they think kids are soft. They stood in that parking garage week after week. And the coffee house, Fountain City is the name of the coffee house, they never invoiced us. I kept asking for an invoice. Tell me how much. And then the next week, guess what? Hot chocolate was ready. And the next week, hot chocolate was ready. And they never invoiced us. It was incredible to see that the community, there were so many heroes in our community that we did things that we needed to do for each other. The Stewart Community Home, which is a home here in Columbus, they house the nearly homeless, the homeless, and the disabled. They allowed us to use, they have a 3-acre backyard, and they allowed us to use that to do monthly connection activities. We did yoga class. We did a tie-dye night safely, where we could spread out outside in masks. This is early COVID. And never once charged us for it. We came and sang Christmas carols. So again, we also wrote Christmas cards and Valentine's cards for them, and collected supplies that they would need. Because again, even when we were struggling, that vision was still the guiding light. How are we going to give back to the community, even when we're struggling? So we did continue. We lost a few more numbers. I think by December of 2020, we were down to 24. Still had 3 choirs, but down to 24, which was scary. And I don't know if I realized how small the numbers were until I saw the group picture. So we did a parking garage choir concert in December. We limited the guests to 40. They all had to do a COVID check-in. They had to separate. And we sang in a parking garage, and we sang the best we could do. And in the middle of the beginning choir's concert, their portion of the concert, the train came by, and Olivia just cut them off, and they stood there, waited for the train. She looked at them, started them again, and it was just like, they're so professional. I was like, this can't be real. Like, never in my wildest dreams did I think that, and I've conducted, we've all done like the homecoming middle of the football field, or like random outdoor concerts. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that we would do this, but we did it. And then in the spring, we were still in the parking garage. However, we decided, instead of doing a parking garage event, that we would do a recording in Legacy Hall, which is our recital hall here, and no audience, just record in masks. And we produced that onto our YouTube channel. And we did the dang thing. I remember the last cutoff was with the top group as we recorded. I think we recorded each choir separately and then we spliced it together. The concert theme was about mental health because we were all struggling. We're still dealing with trauma. We're still going through the trauma of COVID, but the kids they didn't have anywhere else to process what was happening. Sometimes it was like, just sit down and do your work and do the virtual. And, it was a lot of that, like they're just existing in this and no one can explain to them what's happening because we're going through it too. We've never been through this together. And so the whole theme was mental health. And one of the songs that we did was I've Got a Secret for the Mad. And we had them, I stole this from I think it's the Vancouver Children's Choir. You're going to have to fact check me on this.
That's okay.
But one of the things they did was have a card flip up about the things that were bothering them. And then there's a chord that shifts right at the end that's very loud. It's on an ah, so it's got a lot of that resonance, and they flip the card over to things that bring them joy. And we did that where we sent out things and kids got random cards and they got to actually write down on paper, what is it? And we were able to, I think what I said earlier, that choir is so much more than just the music. We process the events in our lives together, but not publicly. So a lot of these kids could sing it out and sing out what was bothering them together, strength in numbers, but maybe they didn't have to do it publicly. Mm-hmm. Things that would maybe bring animosity in the community or fear in the community, or maybe they're struggling with identity, or maybe they're, bullying or any of that. That didn't happen here, but you can sing it out here and you can let it out. And the last cutoff of that concert, I remember just cutting it off and we all just started weeping. We were just weeping because we had made it through COVID year.
You did the work.
And we did the dang thing. And the staff, everybody's crying. And then one of my students goes, "Were we that bad?" And then we all start, that's what VOV is. It's like we laugh, we cry, we do it all together. So now we're rebuilding. Now we're back inside. We're still in COVID. And in July, we thought, well, we'll be back like normal and everyone come on. And then it was like, hey, my name's Delta. I'm here to ruin your plans. And so we created new protocols that were similar to outside. We created them inside because only part of our population was eligible to be vaccinated at this point. And so we wore masks, we separated. They still have to do COVID check-ins where they pre-screen, have you had symptoms? Have you blah, blah, blah. And air filters in the room. I brought air filters from my house and we had them all in every room, rotating using ACDA guidelines. 50. First it was 30 minutes, mm-hmm. Then it became 50 minutes, and so we would mm-hmm. rotate, take a 10-minute break, and rotate. And now it's 50. And so we were able, and we kept the doors open, and we did all the things. And that core group came back in the spring. We lost like 2 or 3 more, but the core group is here. By this time, I know that we've gotten into GMEA and ACDA, and I'm like, no one else can leave because I need you all. So our top group is going with 17 singers, nice. Which is the smallest it's ever been.
That's okay.
But those singers have been, they've been to hell and back. And so I have full confidence that they're going to I've heard them. The sound they can make is incredible. And so we're rebuilding, we're prepping for that. We're prepping for what is that going to look like. We were able to go outside with the top group, which is mostly high school, a few middle schoolers. So they are all at least eligible for vaccine with parent permission, went outside, took masks off, and heard him sing. And the thing I wasn't ready for was those lips flapping in the wind, because they've been pressing against a mask for so long that, I was like, oh, what are all these vowels? What happened here? So that's something that I would love to share with choir directors out there, that when you take those masks off, the sound is not going to be it's not transferable. So you're going to have to fix their face. all
to
that
know.
it's true. Like it was like, what is all of this? Like it was just flappy. I don't know how to describe it. It's just flappy.
Lips flapping in the wind.
They just flapping everywhere. I'm like, what is happening? So we will be masked for our concert next week because we're indoors. And it's hard to even plan what to do in COVID. If I've learned anything, it's to show up each week and do the work and just focus on that week, because it can change like that. I know more about the data of COVID and the numbers and what our county looks like than I thought I would ever, really want to know. And, like I said, they continue to show up. We have auditions coming up and we've had a lot more interest. So I think there's some build back that's starting to happen, which is really, really great. And the great thing too is the staff, taking it back to the music ed side, they've watched this happen. Mm-hmm. Not every idea that we came up with during COVID worked. For example, I took the 2020 literature and tried to do it in the fall in the parking garage, and I should have picked new literature. But they got to watch that struggle and watch how I did choir triage and made it work. You're like, well, okay, we'll just cut this part and we'll move this thing around and we'll, how do we solve problems that, my training did not prepare me for COVID, but my experience has. And now our students, our undergraduates who are going through the program have also gone through COVID, and they don't realize that they will be stronger for it right now. The staff members who are with Voices of the Valley, the multitasking, how no decision feels good. Because I think a lot of times we think, it's black and white. We can choose this or that. No decision that I've made during COVID for Voice of the Valley has ever felt like, yep, this is the perfect decision. I knew that when I brought kids back in masks this semester, I was going to lose kids, because we have families that just don't think masks should be worn. And I knew that was going to be an issue. There's a huge division with that. I also know of other choirs who didn't mask at all and their numbers haven't changed, but we made the choice to mask. And that decision, while in my heart, I believe it was the right one, it doesn't feel great, because you know that you're isolating a particular segment of your population. So none of these have felt great, but we just keep putting one foot in front of the other and getting a little bit back each time. So our concert that's coming up next week is a live audience. We'll be masked, and we're going to just keep putting one foot in front of the other and hoping that it continues to improve, where we can have the normalcy that we so desperately desire.
I love how you've shared your story of just your life of getting here through the experience of the last 7 years with Voices of the Valley. You've made hard decisions. You've done the work. You've told us about transferable skills and how to build on concepts. There's so many great little things we can take away from it. Before we wrap up, can we take this back to where you went into school without any music reading skills? How did that experience what was it like to be in freshman year classes where you were the only one that couldn't read music? And what did you take from that resiliency to become the teacher you are today?
Well, I come from a small business family, so I'm a real hard worker. When you grow up in a small business, failure is not an option. That's the livelihood of your family. I think that was really helpful. I would be lying if I told you it was easy. I definitely was shunned by my classmates, many of them, many who were all-staters. I never went to All-State. I never did any of those things. But I really wanted to be a teacher, and I really love choir. And so I was definitely, I was shunned by many of my classmates who either privately and also to my face told me, you don't deserve to be here. You don't deserve to be at such a prestigious university. And I was told that. I was laughed at. And I remember the first day of music theory, the TA asked us all, that's how this memory is stuck in my head. It's crazy. Asked everyone to say who their favorite composer was. And, Haydn, Handel, Rachmaninoff. And I was like, I don't know any of these people. Who are these people? And they got to me and I said, Joplin. because I grew up playing ragtime and I grew up playing jazz, lots of William Gillick like arrangements growing up on piano. And I love jazz, Fats Waller and Duke Ellington. And I was laughed at, like people snickered at me. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool. But I came back every day and I showed up. And I did the work. I don't know if you can read this on my whiteboard, but I keep this up here. #do the work. I did the work every day. And even the TA, that particular TA was kind of, I don't know, it was very much like the scene in Legally Blonde, like where it's just, I just kept coming back and I kept working hard and I kept working hard. I got a B in theory my first semester. I was happy with that. And also Dr. Pence was incredible. She is incredible. I was in women's chorus and I worked my way up. And my first voice professor, I came in to sing for her. And she, the first time I sang, she said, well, that's just not very good. I'm like, okay, well, how do I fix it? Teach me. Teach me. That's why you're here. And I just wouldn't let up. I would not let up because your job as professor. Unfortunately, unfortunately, she ended up passing on the next day or the next day, the next year. So she passed my sophomore year and I was, ended up in Leonard Johnson's studio, who has also since passed, but he was so good for me because he pushed me, but also he valued me and made sure I was successful.
Oh, that goes back to the roots.
And all of that. And then I got to junior year and Dr. Pence was the same way. She made sure that she put me as an alto so I could read, soprano too, so I could read, and forced me out of melody, forced me out of that. And then I met Hunter March, who was my first methods professor. Day one, he talks about taking his choir to sing with the Michigan Symphony and teaches us partner songs. And all of a sudden, the light was reignited. And all of a sudden, when I had been here and my colleagues were up here because they could read, all of a sudden the scale started to tip. Because if anything, I could teach. And good teaching is good teaching. Mm-hmm. By the way, the small business I was a part of was a children's business. So I'd worked with children my whole life. So I wasn't afraid to do it. And I wasn't afraid to talk to anyone either. And it inspired me. He used to cook for his students he'd host a party every semester and put me in charge of getting all the food and everything, logistics. And I still do it every semester for my kids now, called Porch Picnic. And when COVID hit last year, it became every week because a lot of them lost their job and they didn't have any money. And so they were spending their money on rent and not food. I was cooking every week for them. They taught me how to be servant leaders. The right professors are the ones that I latched onto. The ones who played into, they knew the dedication I had. They knew that I was willing and ready. And of course, I got to study with the amazing Bob Duke and Judith Jellison. And I was captivated by Bob Duke and all of his philosophies. They never gave up on me. The ed professors never gave up on me. And the others that swept me to the side, I didn't have time for them because I had work to do. So I remember one time Leonard Johnson had me perform in it was like an opera variety kind of thing where it's like a studio, but all the studios came together and he wanted me to come out and sing this French love song. I don't even remember what it was now. And he had schooled me on it and told me, here's where it is. And he said, you need to dress like the song you're wearing, or dress like the song you're singing. Okay. And so I watched all these singers come out and they're wearing black and navy and formals. And I rolled out in a red cocktail dress with red heels and sang this French love song, and Leonard's cackling in the back, but that's just who I was. I was like, you know what, if I'm going to be different and y'all don't like me anyway, then I'm going to be me and I'm going to do what I need to do because I got a goal. And here's the funny part about it. 25 of us entered for that degree. 3 of us graduated with music ed. And I graduated a year early too, by the way. I did a 5-year degree in 4 years. And that passion has continued to drive me. And I've never forgotten my promise to Dr. Pence. And I mean, I remind her all the time. I had lunch with her this summer and I'm constantly reminding her, I hope I made good on my promise. I hope, because I have a job to do. And is taught me to pay it forward to my own students. When my own students are really struggling or there's something going on, I step back and think, okay, there was a time when someone took a chance on me, and I don't know what I'd be doing if hadn't let me in, you know?
Mm.
So I just kept going. And I have to tell you, the full circle moment for me was when I started teaching. I guess my second or third year, I auditioned for Conspirare with Craig Johnson. And I got in, and Craig remembered that audition. And I said, I'm going to read for you today. And I got to sight read for him, and I got to close the circle. And singing with him, beyond all the incredible benefits of just singing under Craig Hella Johnson, the musicality and the kindness and how he leads rehearsal, and was the ability to sing difficult music and to read a Mendelssohn fugue. And the first day of rehearsal, I remember in Conspirare, we were reading Mendelssohn's Elijah, and there's a real difficult fugue in there. And I was sitting there and I was tapping my foot quietly, and I was, trying to keep up and all that. And a tenor that was a couple of seats down from me said, it looks real unprofessional for you to be tapping your foot while we sing this rhythm. And I said, you know what else is unprofessional? Singing the wrong rhythm. He didn't talk to me much after that, but I just kind of stayed the course. And then when I became an educator and started teaching music, I started realizing that we got to teach this in a different way. We can't teach it as if it's some secret code language that we do nothing with, that we're trying to get into a clubhouse. We have to teach it as a tool, something that we're using to create the art. And once we've done that, once you cook the meal, you don't set it out on the table with the pots and pans. You wash those babies and put them back in the cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I love it.
So
that's such a great way to end this. You've given us so much great information. This will be the first episode of January, and you've given us a story to inspire us. You've given us resources and tools that we can apply to wherever we are in our situation. And I'm so thankful that you were willing to come on. Is there anything you want to tell the listener before we wrap up?
Just do the work. That's it. Just keep going. Don't stop. You want to be a music teacher? You want to create music? Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Keep doing the work.
I love it. Oh, this was so wonderful, Dr. Fulta. Thank you for giving your time to be on the podcast.
You're so welcome.
Okay, what notes did you take? I'll tell you mine. Value and success, vision and philosophy statements, transferring of skills and knowledge, and building on concepts. Choral artistry is paramount, and you just got to sing it out and make the tough decisions. It's your training, and then on top of that, your experience that makes it all possible. I think I took pretty good notes. What did you think? I'd love to hear what you think. Send me a message, emilyburch.org/contact. Join us over at Patreon. Follow me on Instagram, Dr. MEB. I don't know, whatever you need to do the work. I want to help you get it done, because this whole choral artistry thing is just the coolest job on the planet. I hope that this episode has inspired you to jump out there and make tough decisions and do hard work and see where it takes you. Because you, my friend, you matter. We all know that music matters, especially the transfer of skill and knowledge. And I will see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.